Hello everybody, it's Kenneth from the archives here with another video dipping into our collections and delving into the history of Dundee. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of Dundee's early elected women politicians. Now, women in politics is a subject that has long been of interest to me. You may know that I, many years ago now, did my honours dissertation on women in politics in Dundee, and then I followed that up by doing PhD research on women in party politics in Scotland. And if you're interested in finding out more, both my thesis and my honours dissertation have copies in the archives, which you're welcome to come and consult. Now, before I start this, it's necessary to say a little bit about how local government worked in the past, because it was obviously a little bit different to today. So by the time we come to the late 19th century, Dundee has three forms of local government. We've got the town council, much the same as we have today. But we also have two other elected bodies. We have the school board, an elected body that looked after education, and the parish council or parochial board, which also an elected body and looked after welfare, poor law matters. Now, this continued into the 20th century. After the First World War, the school board evolved into the elected education authority, and both the education authority and the parish council were amalgamated with the main council at the end of the 1920s. But why it's important is because the school board and parish council are the first bodies women could be elected to, starting with the school board. So when the school boards are set up in Scotland in 1872, women can stand for election. And in some parts of Scotland, we see women elected, most famously Flora Stevenson in Edinburgh. Dundee had to wait a little bit longer, and as you'll see, Dundee waiting a little bit longer than other parts of Scotland to have a woman elected to something will become something of a recurring theme in this talk. So it was in 1891 that Dundee School Board got its first female member when Miss Jessie Shaw was elected to it. Now, the parish council's women could start appearing on in parts of Scotland in the 1880s. Dundee had to wait to 1901 before it got its first two women parish councillors. Now, one of them was the lady you see on the left there, who you may well recognise as Mary Lily Walker, who of course was famous for her social work and also for being one of the original students at University College Dundee when teaching started in 1883. Now, she was elected as an independent. Also joining her on the parish council was a well-known Labour Party activist, Agnes Husband. She too had a University College Dundee connection, having attended evening classes in the 1880s at the college. She's well known for a number of things. She was a prominent Labour activist. She would become one of the best known suffragettes in Scotland, and like Mary Lily Walker, she was known for her social and civic work. Indeed, she would eventually go on to be awarded the Freedom of City in recognition for the contribution she made to Dundee. Now, as well as being on the parish council, in 1906 she was elected to the school board. And here we see from Joseph Lee's Tocsin something that she wrote. She wrote regularly on the school board for Lee for the Tocsin. And we also see from the Tocsin this cartoon and poem to promote the re-election of Miss Husband and Peter Reid as the two of the Labour candidates for the school board in the 1909 election. What about the town council, you're asking? Well, women could start standing for elections to town councils in Scotland in 1907. But before the First World War, it was very rare to see a woman elected and quite rare to see a female candidate. Only one woman contested a council election in Dundee before the First World War, Margaret Steele, in 1913. She poured poorly and her campaign did not attract that much attention. Indeed, after the war, when they're commenting on later campaigns, the Dundee newspapers had actually forgotten Steele had ever stood. Because in 1924, when Dundee gets its second female candidate, some of the newspapers actually say this is the first time a woman has stood in Dundee. But we'll come back to that in a minute. What was happening elsewhere after the First World War was women were getting elected. In Edinburgh, Ella Miller is elected to Edinburgh Council in January 1919. In November 1920, Glasgow gained its first 5 female women councillors, including the very famous Mary Barber. Even Aberdeen got a woman councillor by 1930, but Dundee would have to wait. Now, as I've said, we did get a woman standing for Dundee Council in 1924. She was Annie Lamont. Now, this is a name that until a few years ago you probably wouldn't have heard of. Despite her having a very remarkable life, she's kind of been badly neglected by historians. Two things have changed that in recent years. One was the discovery of a letter by her in the post office time capsule that was opened as part of Great War Dundee. The other is the work that's been done by Abertay University as they've researched their history because she studied at Dundee Technical College. She was a very accomplished female politician, and in 1924 was chosen as the Labour candidate for the 3rd Ward. Now, the 3rd Ward covered Lochee. She was taking on the incumbent member, David Neve, who was backed by the moderates. At this time, local politics in Dundee basically boiled down to the moderates, who were a loose coalition of people who were in national politics liberal or conservative or independent against candidates run by the Labour Party. Neve was very well known, very popular, so she had a difficult challenge. She did fairly well, cutting his majority to around 200. Sadly, though, she would never stand for the council again, and indeed she took her own life in 1926, which caused a fairly big outpouring of. But 1926 would prove memorable for another reason. It marked the debut in town council elections of Mrs. Lily Miller. Now, Lily Miller had been a parish councillor, ironically elected in 1922 with moderate backing. But while on the parish council, she'd become very associated with Labour politics. And it was Labour who nominated her for the council in 1926. She stood for Ward 2, which covered the west end of Dundee, and was really fairly poor territory for the Labour Party. She didn't have much chance of getting elected, but she didn't let that deter her. And although she was defeated in 1926, she immediately tried again. And the cartoon we have of her here from the Dundee Free Press actually comes from her second attempt to get onto the council in 1927. She certainly wasn't somebody that let failure get her down. She kept getting selected by Labour for wards, but wards that she was very unlikely to win in. And in 1934, her 8th attempt resulted in yet another defeat. However, in 1935, her luck changed. A new ward had been created. Wards 5 and 7 had been split up, and a new ward created around the hill town. And this was clearly going to be good territory for Labour. There was 3 places available in that inaugural election, and Lily Miller comfortably topped the poll. And she would go on to have a distinguished career on Dundee Council as a Labour member until her retirement in 1954. So it was 1935 before Dundee elected a woman to its council, but it elected a female MP in 1931, Florence Horsburgh. Actually, while Dundee was the last of the then 4 cities to elect a female councillor, it was the first of them to elect a female MP. Scotland had had female MPs before, the Duchess of Atholl in Kinross in West Perthshire in 1923 being the first, followed up by Jenny Lee in Lanarkshire in 1929. But Florence Horsburgh, who was elected in Dundee in 1931, was the joint third and the first to sit for a city constituency. She was actually unique in many ways. She's still the only woman to have represented a Dundee constituency at Westminster, and she's the only Conservative to have represented Dundee at Westminster. She would be re-elected in 1935, topping the poll for the 2-member seat. This was seen as quite a big surprise because elsewhere the Conservatives were going downhill. In Dundee, she improved her position. And she had a really remarkable career and was really one of the leading Scottish politicians of the later 30s and 1940s, and later in Manchester, Moss Side, where she went to be MP in 1950, she would have an even more distinguished career. But we can perhaps talk about her career more fully in another video in the future. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that brief glimpse into some of Dundee's female politicians. Meantime, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk again soon.